And here we are again, Year 11. Okay, last lesson we were looking at closing the development gap, and you looked at 7 strategies out of 8. Today we're looking at the 8th strategy, which is tourism. And tourism is used as a way of developing economies and closing that gap. We are going to focus on an example. You have to have done an example as part of your specification. So we're going to look at Jamaica, and we're going to assess how effective tourism has been. It's not good enough for you to just say that tourism is really effective and therefore there's no development gap anymore. It's a case of assessing how effective it's been. How much has it actually made a difference for the people of Jamaica? This lesson will finish with one question to submit today, but it is a 9-mark question, and it will be you assessing how effective it has been at closing the gap. To start, there are 5 questions for you to do based on the information that you can see on this slide. I suggest you pause this slide now, have a go at the questions, write your answers in your books, and then move on. 3, 2, 1, pause. Okay, here are some of the answers then. So the state of Jamaica's economy, well, it's based on a range of minerals, oil and bauxite, agricultural products such as sugar and rum, and some manufacturing. It's a middle-income country, but it suffered with high unemployment, debt, and slow growth. So that was what the economy was like or is like. How has tourism contributed? Taxes, employment, and income are the 3 main things. That's led to development, including the setting up of good international airports and also ports for ships as well. And obviously this is linked to other development that will have happened in the country, but mainly the way that tourism has contributed is the tax that comes from it, the tax from the employment of people working in tourism, and therefore the income that it generates. Main tourist attractions are the beaches, the beautiful blue seas and white sands, the climate, which is hot and sunny and fairly consistent, and the culture, which people love to go and see, this kind of Rastafarianism culture. You could always look that up on Google and see what that even means. Okay, using the map, describe the distribution of the main tourist areas. The 4 areas are mostly on the northern coast, with 1 area on the south coast, which is where the capital of Kingston is. None are inland. Those are the kind of things that you probably should have written. You may have said along the northern coast, on the west and the eastern sides, and a bit more central as well. You could have added that into your answer. Okay, so that's a bit of an intro to Jamaica's economy. In terms of the order, this was the order that it was a massive guess. It was a bit of a long shot. Chances are you wouldn't have got it right, but it doesn't matter. It got you thinking. So this is the order of the contribution of tourism to Jamaica's economy. As you can see, it covers many sectors. It's not just about money for shopkeepers and for hotel people and for tour guides. It covers all these sectors, so it contributes over 25% of the economy in terms of transport and communications, property, all the hotels that get built, which links into construction, which is the construction work of hotels, restaurants, new roads, airports, etc. You've got agriculture and fishing, which links to providing extra food for all the tourists. Utility bills, because obviously the hotels and restaurants will be using energy and so on, so that will run up utility bills. Manufacturing, in designing and making products that will be that might end up being sold to tourists, but also just the manufacturing of products that are needed in the restaurants and the hotels, and so on and so forth. So you've got all sorts of sectors of the economy which have been boosted simply because of tourism, and the numbers, as you can see, are quite high. 25%, 20%. These are high numbers. They are significant. Your task was to suggest why these sectors have benefited so much, and I think really I've just explained it in my answer there, is that tourism will indirectly create work in all these other sectors, so money can be made that way. Moving on. Okay, I'd like you to read through the passage here and suggest 2 reasons why cruise passengers spend less than other visitors. I want you to do a bit of a calculation, please. And finally, I want you to think about to what extent tourism is benefiting the economy. Is it a lot, a little, and I want you to look at the numbers. Have a go at these 3 questions in your exercise book, and then you'll be ready to move on. 3, 2, 1, pause. Okay, in terms of the cruise passengers, one reason is that they simply spend less time on the islands. They're spending less time, then they're going to spend less money. They're quite restricted as the cruise will move on to other places. So it might be that they're only there for a day or 2 before the cruise moves on. So they're spending less time, which means they're spending less money. The second thing is that they spend less money as their accommodation is already sorted, isn't it? Because they sleep on the ship. They've already paid for that. And things like their food, again, it might already be on board, and so they're not actually spending money out in restaurants and things like that. So the ship itself is providing them with a lot of the stuff that they need, so therefore they don't go spending in the economy. So it's not as good for Jamaica. Number 2, the percentage was 58%. That was a straightforward calculation of 70 divided by 120 times 100 to get the percentage. And thirdly, to what extent is tourism benefiting the economy? Well, I would say 24% of GDP is almost a quarter. That's a lot. It's probably closer to 30% now because we've moved on from 2014 and we're closer to 2024. So it's probably more like 30%. It means that they're very reliant on tourism, and should tourism cease, that means stop, for any reason, it would hurt their economy significantly. So I would say that tourism is benefiting the economy significantly, a lot, in other words. Okay, I want you to have a go at using the photo and the text. How can tourism boost the economy of local communities? Write your answer down, and then when you've done that, continue with the presentation. 3, 2, 1, pause. Okay, so you've probably picked out spending in local shops and services as shown by the photo. Job creation in multiple sectors as we've previously discussed. That's indirect jobs as well as direct jobs. New skills, which means that it will open up people to other paid employment. As they become more skilled, it'll open them up to higher paid jobs. So that's another thing as well. Okay, moving on. Okay, 2 tasks for you to do here. So pause the slide now. You'll need to use the information on this slide to answer those 2 activities. When you feel you've done that, unpause to hear the answers. Okay, in terms of number 1, improvements to infrastructure will boost tourism because if you make better roads, rail, airports, and so on, water systems, sanitation systems, then it means that that businesses can set up and that tourists can come easily to the environment, easily to the island. It basically opens up the islands to them. Tourists can't come if there aren't water supplies, if there aren't roads to transport them to the different areas. So actually, by improving the infrastructure, you boost tourism because people can get around and businesses are encouraged to come and set up in the areas, which leads to boosting tourism even more. In terms of the environment, you've got to protect the environment because that's what people are coming for. They're coming for the beautiful beaches, the climate, the oceans, and if those things get damaged, then tourists will stop coming. So improving the environment or protecting the environment will obviously boost tourism. For task 2, the advantages, I'm going to highlight on the screen here. So you would have had things like, we're going to start with the advantages first. So things like conservation and landscaping, because that's the money that the tourists have brought in, can be spent on conserving areas. Job opportunities, we've got landscaping again in Montego Bay. We've got a new water treatment plant, which has led to reduced pollution. We have got direct and indirect income, and we have got ecotourism, which is environmentally friendly tourism. So those are improvements to the environment. In terms of infrastructure, we've had obviously a high level of investment, but that's on the north coast, still an advantage. We've got new port and cruise liner facilities. And in terms of the quality of life, well, in Montego Bay, we've got very wealthy Jamaicans which are living in high quality housing and have a high standard of living. So those are all advantages. If we move on to the disadvantages, however, we've got, up in the environment, we've got footpath erosion, we've got waste, we've got harmful emissions, and in terms of infrastructure, we have got the fact that improvements in roads and airports have been slower and some parts of the island remain isolated. So in other words, the investment hasn't benefited everybody and it hasn't benefited everywhere. Same with quality of life. Although we have wealthy Jamaicans living in good quality housing and a high standard of living in the north, we've got large numbers, not small numbers, large numbers of people living nearby in poor housing. They don't even have enough food supply. They've got inadequate access to fresh water, healthcare and education. So those are the negatives. So the development that has come about from tourism is uneven. It's benefited in the northern areas where all the main tourist areas are, but it has not benefited elsewhere, especially not inland and not down on the south coast. And that takes us to our final activity, which is to answer this question: evaluate the effectiveness of tourism as a strategy to reduce the development gap for an LIC or an NEE that you have studied. You have studied an NEE, which is Jamaica, and I think we've established that tourism is very effective, but it hasn't benefited everyone and it hasn't benefited everywhere. So in terms of evaluating the effectiveness, you need to start by stating where you have studied. And then the second bullet point there, I believe tourism has reduced the development gap to a what extent? This is your view. Now, I would always go down the road of saying a partial extent, because there are two sides to the argument. The main body of your answer then needs to address that, needs to explain why you've come to that decision, and then you must conclude. And in your conclusion, you must link back to the extent and give your main fact or your main evidence to back up your point. You need to spend about 12 minutes on this, please, and then you need to submit it to your teacher. Once you've done that, today's lesson is done. Well done, and I'll see you again next time for our next online geography lesson. Cheerio, folks. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.